Hello and welcome to BBC World News. I'm Martine Dennis. Our top story this hour: bloodshed returns to the streets of Egypt. More than 50 people are killed as security forces clash with supporters of the ousted President Mohamed Morsi. We're broadcasting live from London. You're watching BBC World News. Also to come in the programme, US Secretary of State John Kerry praises Syria as it begins destroying its chemical weapons. Thousands are forced to leave their homes as powerful Typhoon Fito slams into southeast China.
Hello, I'm Sally Bundock. In business today, leaders of the 21-nation APEC grouping are meeting in Indonesia -1 as President Obama stays home to deal with the US government budget crisis. Plus, trying to make extreme poverty history, the World Bank calls for a new focus on managing risks in developing countries.
But first this morning, at least 50 people have been killed in Egypt as supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood clashed with police. Now, the Brotherhood is banned, its assets have been seized, and its figurehead, the country's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, is in jail, charged with inciting deadly violence. Now, these latest clashes came on the same day Egypt commemorated the 40th anniversary of its 1973 war with Israel. Here's the BBC's Quentin Somerville.
It was meant to be a day of national unity, marking a war of 40 years ago. But instead, Cairo was a fresh battlefield, and Egypt's new deep divisions were brutally exposed. Police and soldiers pushed back Muslim Brotherhood protesters. They'd been trying to get to Tahrir Square. Some were injured, others fared far worse. A body is carried away from the scene.
So we've just been pushed back into the side streets, not far from the bridges to Tahrir Square.
They are shooting gas!
You can hear lots of shooting, tear gas coming in. People trying to take cover away from that tear gas. But the security forces seem to be trying to push back these pro-President Morsi demonstrators.
A massive show of force kept both sides apart, but the ousted president's supporters said they were being targeted.
We can't imagine that's happened in our country. It's our country. We are calling for freedom. No more than that. So they are killing us. They're shooting us in the streets. What happened?
But things couldn't have been more different inside the security cordon around Tahrir. Here, they praised General al-Sisi, the army chief who ousted President Morsi.
Okay, he's my hero.
He's your hero?
Yeah. He can save us from terrorism of brotherhood.
The military are respected above all else in Egypt, and they're in control. But their day of national celebration ended with division and bloodshed on the streets of the Egyptian capital.
With wind speeds of more than 150 kilometres an hour, Typhoon Fito has made landfall in China, forcing the authorities to move hundreds of thousands of people to safety. Now, this is the 23rd typhoon to hit the country's southeastern coastal region this year. From Shanghai, here's our correspondent, John Sudworth.
Towards the tail end of this year's peak cyclone season, Fito brought with it the usual devastating force of a typhoon, prompting a red alert from the authorities, the highest weather warning level. In the early hours of the morning, the eastern provinces of Zhejiang and Fujian were battered by wind speeds above 150 kilometers an hour and waves reportedly as high as 10 meters. Over the weekend, soldiers were called in to strengthen flood defences and more than 500,000 people were moved to safety. China is used to dealing with these extreme weather events, but nonetheless, the risks to life and property remain high. 2 weeks ago, Typhoon Usagi claimed at least 25 lives in the southern province of Guangdong. The wider economic cost is high too. Once again, transport across a wide region faces major disruption, with roads closed and train services and flights cancelled, affecting travellers as far afield as the capital, Beijing. Fito is expected to weaken as it moves inland, tracking north and west, but many thousands will continue to bear the brunt. It will bring 2 to 3 days of heavy rainfall in its wake. John Sudworth, BBC News, Shanghai.
Now, the annual summit of Asia-Pacific leaders is underway on the Indonesian island of Bali. And on the sidelines of this meeting, US Secretary of State John Kerry and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov have been discussing Syria. The two countries have agreed to press the UN to set a date for a new peace conference. Geneva 2 is what it's known as, and they're hoping for this to be sometime in the second week of November. Mr. Kerry thanked Russia for its role in forging the deal to rid Syria of its chemical weapons and said the Assad regime also deserves credit for complying with the deal.
And it's not insignificant that within days of the passing of this resolution in New York, inspectors are in Syria, they are on the ground, and now they are already proceeding to the destruction of chemical weapons. That actually began yesterday. There are missile warheads and other instruments that were destroyed yesterday. So the process has begun in record time, and we are appreciative for the Russian cooperation as well as obviously for the Syrian compliance to this date.
Well, the international experts who are overseeing the actual operation on the ground expect that it will take about 9 months to dispose of Syria's arsenal. Here's our Middle East correspondent Paul Wood, who's reporting from the UN in New York.
A good beginning for the international disarmament experts in Damascus. Away from the cameras, the regime today destroyed chemical warheads, aerial bombs and mixing equipment. Syria has declared some 20 weapons sites, thought to be in a number of locations. It's claimed there are 1,000 tons of chemical weapons, one of the world's largest stockpiles. They're said to be sarin nerve agent, VX gas, mustard gas and chlorine. The regime's been given 9 months to destroy it all.
Well, I think there's reason to be cautiously optimistic at this point. The Syrians did meet the very first deadline that they were given, which was to file their information within a week. And all indications are that they've been cooperative with the inspection team so far. But so far, of course, the team has still been in Damascus.
Syria's rebels don't believe President Assad will comply. They say the regime's been secretly moving chemical weapons within Syria and to Lebanon, though there's no proof of that. They say they have 1,000 tons of weapons, but we know they have more, says this senior rebel officer. They say they have 19 or 20 sites, but we know they have more. Diplomats say President Assad has been left with no choice but to disarm. It's said he understands he can't use chemical weapons again without inviting a US military strike. The UN had to close its Syria monitoring mission last year because of the difficulties of working across active front lines. The chemical weapons experts did have a very good start to their mission today, but eventually they'll face the same difficulties and dangers. And even if they rid Syria of its chemical weapons, that won't bring the civil war to a close. Civil war which has seen 100,000 people killed so far with conventional munitions. Paul Wood, BBC News, at the UN in New York.
Right, earlier I mentioned the APEC summit, the Asia-Pacific meetings.